It's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
All right. We rolling? All right. Perfect. Hey, guys. Got a great show in store for you. All right. We are about to go live. All right. Here we go. All right. Just hang tight while I go through this intro. Hey everyone, you're listening to Business Minds Coffee Chat, and I am your host, Jay Scherr, and I am super excited today. I have got a fantastic guest in the studio with me today. My guest is a wife to Jerry, a proud mother of 4, and a grandmother to 3. She's originally from Massachusetts and relocated to Palm Coast in 2006. She earned her undergraduate degree from Georgetown University, a master's in nursing from the University of San Diego, and a doctor of nursing practice from the University of Florida. Wow. She served in the U.S. Army Nurse Corps for over 10 years, where she achieved the rank of major. And when she's not working, you'll likely find her running, doing CrossFit, and sewing. We might have to explore that one a little bit. Please welcome the founder of Amethyst Wellness and the woman who's empowering us to take control of our health and well-being, Amy Coopersmith. Amy, it is so great to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
It is my pleasure, and I am really excited about today. And, we've had a chance to spend a little bit of time together, and quite frankly, I've seen your name in this community for so long, and I've probably been to your website, probably a dozen or so times, and I keep saying to myself, I need to go there, right? I need to go there and learn more about you. So today, we're going to explore more about you and who you are. So I thought as a good starting point, I would love it if you would share with all of us maybe a memorable or a profound experience that you've had in your life that not only impacted you, but actually changed you. So a memorable or profound experience.
The first thing that comes to mind during my career was during my work at the health department. We saw many infants, brand new babies. There was one in particular that was born early, and he tried to die on us in our clinic, but we didn't let him.
Thank goodness.
Yes. And so, this 5-pound baby, we ended up doing CPR for a little bit, and thankfully he did make it. But it's a moment I'll never forget. But I was very thankful that he chose to stay with us. And anyway, and I thought about that moment a lot because earlier in my career, I was an ICU nurse, and we did codes all the time, and people died all the time. And sometimes I'd say, well, what is the point of all this? But the point was, I believe, for me to be so familiar with that process that it was like second nature. And during that moment, it wasn't so much about them, but about this life that, has things to do. I really believe that child is going to do something amazing. Anyway, so that's it.
Well, so let me ask you something about that experience and also as an ICU nurse. So when you're dealing with death, life and death, but let's talk about when someone doesn't make it.
Right.
How do you personally, as a nurse and as a professional, how do you process that? How do you deal with that psychologically, especially when it's something that you may see more than once? So just kind of speak to that process for you, so it doesn't become consuming for you. So talk about processing that psychologically.
Yeah, I was very young during that time in my life. I was in my early 20s. And when I think back on that, there was so much responsibility for me at such a young age. And even that was the hardest job that I've ever had,
Mm.
because if you weren't on your game, if you just didn't pay attention to something for even a minute, then something bad could happen.
Hmm.
Um, which now I think, wow, that was a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
I feel like back then I would kind of dissociate from the outcome. I wouldn't feel it.
Okay.
And I just wouldn't let myself feel it.
Yeah.
Um, but also at that time, being so young, my own mortality was very far away. Like I wasn't old yet. So for me, dying from a heart attack wasn't something that was likely going to happen anytime in the future. Even my parents were still young and healthy then, and my grandparents were even alive. So
Mm.
it felt very far away. And it's something, with all of us as we get older and we see our parents age and we age, and we know that that might not be so far away.
Sure. Yeah, it really does become more of the conversation as as the years start to add up, and as we realize that the runway in front of us may not be quite as long as what what is
Mm-hmm.
behind
Yeah,
us. And but it is a good reminder to us all to make sure that we are living the best life that we possibly can, and to not take anything or any moment for granted.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, share with us a little bit about your early life. So, I mentioned in the intro that you're originally from Massachusetts.
Yes.
And how long did you live in Massachusetts?
So my entire childhood.
Okay.
So I was there, and then I went away to college, and that was always home.
Hmm.
But then I was in the Army right after college, so I lived a little bit of everywhere. So I never lived in Massachusetts again after my childhood.
Okay. And do you have siblings?
I do.
And how many siblings do you
Two.
have? Two? Okay. And are we talking brother, sister,
I
two brothers, two sisters?
I have two older brothers.
Okay. All right. And are they still around?
No.
Okay.
One of my brothers died last year from
Okay.
a drug-related issue.
I'm so sorry to hear
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Is the other brother living?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we're taking this time to reconnect, and it was kind of a wake up for all of us that we don't always have tomorrow.
Yes, that is absolutely true. What was life like growing up for you? What type of child were you? So, it's you and at that time, two older brothers.
Yeah.
Give us just a snapshot, a sense of what Amy was like in her much, much younger years.
Yeah, so I was kind of a shy kid, but I liked to do things. I would volunteer to, I don't know, I liked to play soccer, and I did dance, and um, so even back then, and I find as an adult too, there's a part of me now that's very introverted, but
Okay.
then there's Dr. Amy who's not, right? So, but I was a pretty good kid, I'd like to say, and it having older brothers, I was always trying to keep up, and they're 4 and 6 years older than me, so I was never as good at games or things, but it made me very comfortable in my adult life, being an underdog and being
Mm.
around people who are smarter, stronger, better. It just it doesn't upset me, and I feel like I'm always trying to catch up, and it's very comfortable for me.
So, at what point did you decide or know what you wanted, what career path you wanted to follow? So, can you do you recall that particular time in life or that moment where you could visualize what life was going to look like for you?
Yeah, so I was about 16, about that time in high school where you're deciding what you want to go to school for. I knew I wanted to go to school for something.
Okay.
And I either wanted to be a fashion designer or a nurse, two very different things. And even back then, I was somewhat practical. And so I knew that the most likely way I was going to be able to make a living would be to be a nurse.
Hmm.
Um, and and then that's how it started. And there were times early on where I thought, is this really for me? Because being a shy kid, having my early clinical days, having to talk to strangers, and it created a lot of stress, and it was something that if I eventually got over. But at the
Yeah.
time, I don't know if I can do this. And but
But you showed yourself that you
oh
could.
yes,
In a big way. I love that. All right, so I want to speak to fashion designer
yeah.
for a moment. So I can just imagine, right? You're making a decision here: should fashion designing or nursing, right? And you said you followed the path that you felt you could maybe derive more income
Right.
from.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so from a fashion designing perspective, is that something that you had been into since you were a young child? Were you actually designing clothes and making clothes?
So I did design them, and I did learn to make some things.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I made some clothes back then, and um,
So what is one piece of clothing that you are most proud of that you've made?
I made a little black dress
Little black
that
dress.
went with everything, and I
Okay.
had it for many years. It went the way of old clothing, but I don't have it now. But yeah, and I did it from little pieces of fabric, and it was beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Good for you. Look at you being multi-talented. I love that. That's so cool. So, who's been the biggest role model in your life?
That's a good one. I enjoy having role models, and I'm always looking. Um, but
So, up to this point,
probably my grandmother.
your grandmother.
Yes,
What was your grandmother's name?
Betty.
All right. Tell me a little bit about Betty and why you decided that Betty has been the biggest role model.
Well, she was a nurse,
Okay.
and she was just very strong woman. She was little; she wasn't a big person,
Okay.
but just a leader, and very smart,
Yeah.
and just kind of took care of everybody.
And did you have an opportunity to spend much time with Betty?
Yeah, she lived to be 100.
Wow.
So, so yes. But during my childhood, she was just a really big influence. And even physically, she could out bicycle me as a kid. I would be struggling to keep up with a 60-year-old. Um,
Amazing.
and my favorite photo of her, she's actually climbing, she's 95 years old, and she's on the top of a slide, like one of those old fashioned slides that she climbed up, and she's in mid flight down the slide.
At
95.
95.
Yeah.
Wow, that's memorable. That is really cool. So, do you do you think about Betty today when you're in certain circumstances and you're looking to maybe summon some of that strength and that leadership and that wisdom? Does she come to mind?
She does. And even,
Yeah.
when I'm with my own grandchildren, like how would she be in this situation? And, it's, in our modern times, children today aren't how we were,
Hmm.
and they shouldn't be, but it just makes parenting and grandparenting a little bit challenging.
Yeah, I get it. That's so interesting. So, do you enjoy reading?
I do.
What type of books do you enjoy reading?
I
Mostly.
I read everything. So many times, if I have time in the morning, I'll read some sort of inspirational, um, whether it's self help or business or something serious in the morning,
Okay.
and then in the evenings, I'll just read simple fiction, just to relax, to go to bed.
Okay.
But I'm always reading something on nutrition or health, and I'm kind of a nerd that way.
Now, you're also a published author.
I am.
I saw one of your books on Amazon. And what was it like for you to decide to actually make that decision that I'm going to bring a book to life and I'm going to sell that book? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so pieces of that book were written over the years, and
Hmm.
I was doing some nutritional counseling and with one of my clients, and I emailed her a bunch of stuff, and I said, "Wow, I just emailed you a book," and I went, "I just emailed you a book," and so I started to take everything I had written and put it together, and then develop the whole book. And I actually hired a book coach, um, whose name is escaping me right at the moment, but Mr. King. Do
Okay.
you know him? Yeah. Anyway, which was very helpful. And he wrote a book called How to Write a Book in 30 Days or something like that. So I just did my homework and I wrote a little bit every day and then we had a book.
How about
And
that?
yeah,
You set a goal for yourself and you made it happen.
yeah, and it's great. I'm pretty proud of that.
You
And
should be. You
thanks.
should be. I think that is really cool. So, Amy, we're going to hit pause on our
Mhm.
conversation here because we're going to take a brief break to thank our incredible sponsors. My friends, you are listening to Business Minds Coffee Chat. Don't you go anywhere. We will be right back. All right. Great job. You doing okay?
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good. Good. All right. Think I caught you off guard a little bit on the brothers question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
I chose not to explore that any deeper. I could just sense from you, so I wanted to be a little sensitive, and
thank you.
of course I didn't know any of that, right?
It's
So
okay.
you know,
I'm like, Baker should ask that.
you just never know where the conversations are
Yeah.
going to go.
Actually, one of the books I came across from Huberman's podcast, he had interviewed a psychiatrist, and so Huberman on air went through therapy, which I thought was so brave of him to be
Oh
that
yeah.
sensitive. And I actually downloaded that guest book,
Okay.
and it's talking about different parts and how they're formed and stuff. But anyway, just exploring vulnerabilities and
Do you remember who the guest was?
Dick Schwartz,
Dick Schwartz. Okay.
Richard.
Okay. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, it was good. It was the title captured my attention just about healing. It was like mental wellness, and
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, that's interesting."
Yeah. I read a lot of books in that genre,
Yeah,
that topic.
it's on Kindle Unlimited.
Okay. All right.
No bad parts.
No bad parts. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
All right. You ready to dive back in?
Let's do it.
All right. Mark, we all set? Okay. All right, we're back. And again, you're listening to Business Minds Coffee Chat, and I am in the studio today with my very special guest, Dr. Amy Cooper Smith. What a fantastic conversation we're having so far, and we are going to keep that conversation going. So, before we took the break, we were talking about books, and you were sharing with us the types of books that you enjoy reading. Inspirational books, self help books, and fiction books in the evening. And not only do you enjoy reading, but you have also written a book. You're a published author, which I think is wonderful. I love to hear that. So I want to stay on the theme of books for a moment. Since you're already a published author, I want to switch to a different type of book here.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to write your autobiography, what do you think an appropriate title for that book would be? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. That's a really good question.
Dr. Amy is thinking hard.
So, one thing you should all know about me is I'm extremely analytical, and so when asked a question like that, I will think about it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be maybe I would call it stop thinking so much. I don't know.
Great way to answer that one. Okay. So I'm just going to write down just a crib note to myself. Stop overthinking.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Nothing
Actually, I
wrong
like
with
that.
that.
Let's go with that.
Okay. All right. So have you always been analytical?
I think so.
Yeah.
Was something early in my Army career. You get rated. You actually have very detailed evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things my first evaluator said is, you're very observant, and
Mm-hmm.
you watch people, and then you figure out how you're supposed to respond to it. And I hadn't noticed that about myself prior to that. And I said, you're right. I do that. Like, just kind of think before you act, and
Yeah.
just but definitely it's my thinking and analyzing has served me well to this point.
I'll bet it has.
But I do find as I get older, it's something I'm working on to stop thinking.
So tell me why that is important to you at this particular stage in life, learning to not overthink and just to really be able to be in the moment and to be able to accept what is and navigate through it. So why is it important to you right now?
I think when I turned 50 last year, I started to enter this phase of, okay, what next? And, so much of my life has been about achieving goals and coming to this point. And now I feel like it's time to go to that next stage, which I'm still trying to figure out. But during that, I've done a lot of self-analysis and, thinking about why I am who I am.
Okay.
And some of that's good and some not,
Yeah.
as with all of us, I think. But I think when a person overthinks or overanalyzes, you can cause a lot of, distress and uncertainty. And, sometimes you just do need to be in the moment and enjoy the things that are happening around you.
Absolutely. So you want to go through a little coaching session right now,
Okay.
live on the air? You game?
Sure.
Okay. So you just turned 50 recently, and you brought up the question that many of us ask as we go through different seasons of life. And that question is, what's next?
What's next?
Right? We're exploring, we're trying to figure it out. So tell me, what is the very first thing that comes to mind for you when you think about, no limits on this. If you pictured yourself doing anything right now that would bring you a sense of joy and fulfillment, what would it be? First thing that comes to mind. Don't overthink it.
So I want to day hike the Appalachian Trail.
Okay, day hike the Appalachian Trail. All right. So I interviewed last week on the radio show a gentleman who is leaving, I believe, this week or next, who's taking 6 months off to hike the entire 2,500-mile Appalachian Trail through 14 states. So what would it take for you to do a day hike on the Appalachian Trail? What do you need to do starting today in order to accomplish that?
Well, funny you should ask because today I am training a new provider.
Okay.
So for my business, it's very important that what I've started continues. And obviously I can't leave for long periods of time to go do fun things
Okay.
unless I have the team in place. So what I'm doing right now is developing my team so that that awesomeness can continue, but maybe without me being there every day.
Okay. All right. So let's stay on this thread here for just another moment or two, because I want all of our listeners, as well as those who are watching on YouTube, to be able to think about the kinds of questions that we should be asking when we ask the what's next, right? Because we can think about, we can visualize the thing that we would want to do, but until we attach some action to it, right, and actually write down what it is that we're interested in and how we're going to achieve that, nothing happens, right?
Right.
Because change requires change. You know that in your own business and what you do every day in helping people live a healthier lifestyle with better well-being as well. So you're obviously putting the right infrastructure in place, getting your team trained up, right, making sure that in your absence that things continue to move forward. And right now it is, as we're recording this, it is mid-May.
Right.
Excuse me, mid-March. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong calendar. Mid-March. So if you were to give me a date when you're actually going to leave to take this hike on the Appalachian Trail, knowing that it is right now mid-March, when is that going to happen? Don't think about all the things you have
Right.
to do. Just give me the date. When is it going to happen?
January 15th of
Okay.
2026.
January 15th,
Might be too cold, but
2026.
yeah.
That's okay. We like it. That's a challenge. So
Start in the south, maybe.
So what I would do, and I'm going to send you a reminder that
Okay.
January 15th is
Okay.
the date that you're leaving on this trip. So what we would typically do is we take the date, of the thing in the future, and we
Hmm.
start to work backwards, and we really start to identify the things that we need to do, and every action we take needs to roll up that ultimately takes us to that end game,
Okay.
right? You with me?
Yeah.
All right. So those are the things that I would be working on with you to make sure that you're achieving the thing that answers the question, what's next, that you've got action tied to it, and that it's something that brings you joy and fulfillment. All right.
Cool.
Thank you for participating in
Yeah.
that little mini
That
coaching
was fun.
session. All right. So if you had the opportunity to have a conversation. Nope, I'm going to back up. I was going to ask you a different question, but I'm going to ask you this one instead because of the field that you're in and the work that you do. So here it is. If you had the opportunity to have a one-to-one conversation with Robert Kennedy Jr.,
Ooh.
of course, Robert Kennedy Jr. is our Secretary of Health and Human Services. What is one question that you would ask him? Any question, but knowing what you're involved in on a day in,
Hmm.
day out basis, what would you want to ask Robert Kennedy Jr.?
Well, he's very interesting, and I know it's been somewhat controversial because he's not of a medical background.
Mm-hmm.
So my question would be how he came to this point of he's not formally trained, but what led him to make the decisions that he's making or the goals that he's trying to accomplish. So where's that coming from?
Okay. All right. So you'd want to find out the background behind the decision making
Yes.
processes, right? Okay. All right. Very good. Where's the information coming from? How are you assessing? How are you actually making the decisions?
Yes.
And also, I would think thinking about the impact of those decisions as well,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. What excites you most about the healthcare space today?
The healthcare space today, it's it's actually somewhat concerning. I feel like we really need for traditional healthcare to make it better. I think people lack proper access to care. It's very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So traditional care, I don't feel like it's in a good space right now. When you look at what other countries have done, our you know we, our what's the word disparities or like we rank a lot lower than we should with all of our resources, and we need to ask why that is. Why aren't we a healthier nation? And
So those are the things that concern you
yes,
about the healthcare space
yes.
today. What excites you the most as you think about whether it's new technologies, new learnings,
Hmm.
AI, all of
Yeah,
those things? What really excites you as you think about it?
I think what they can do now with genetics
Okay.
and looking at an individual's DNA to determine what treatment would actually work for them.
Mm.
So that's something that has always been challenging individuals' differences. We say this medication works for most people, but maybe not for you. And so I think that there's a huge area there where they can really fine tune care.
Ooh, that's very interesting. Absolutely. So, Amy, if you could change one thing about Palm Coast,
Mm.
if you had the ability to wave the magic wand and could make the big decision, what is the one thing that you would want to change?
We've grown a lot since I've moved here, and I'm very excited to see new businesses coming in. From what I've heard, though, some businesses have trouble establishing. So if I were to make things, control that to make it easier for businesses to establish and to bring more really neat things to this area.
All right. Okay, so
Yeah.
making it easier for businesses as well as attracting
Yes.
more businesses to the area. Okay, very good. All right. So, as we are wrapping up our conversation, I would love it if you would give all of us, including me,
Hmm.
one challenge. What is one challenge that you would give to us and encourage us to start doing that today?
Move your body.
Move your body.
Yes.
Okay.
And that can be if right now you're, not able to move very well, figuring out, what can I do within my resources,
Mm-hmm.
my capabilities. But I feel like everything from physical health to mental health improves when we move. So just find ways to move. And I know there can be challenges. It's not always easy, but
Well, I'm right there with you. I try to make a point to be intentional about moving my body every
mhm,
day. And people ask me today when I'm in the gym 7 days a week, why are you in the gym 7 days a
mhm,
week? Why is that so important? And I would tell you that the reason has certainly shifted over the years, but the primary reason today not only is the physical aspect of it, but I would say about 70% of the reason is psychological.
mhm.
It is
Yeah,
just mental health, feeling better, and knowing that you're doing good for
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. I believe exercise is the cure for anxiety. It's
Mm,
impossible to be anxious when your heart rate is up from exercise.
I
Yeah,
right there with you.
yeah.
Dr. Amy, I want to thank you so very much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat.
Thank
What a
you.
great
I had a great
conversation.
time. Thank you
I'm,
so
I'm
much.
so glad to hear that, and I hope you'll join me again at some point in the
Yeah,
near
I'd love
future.
to. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. And my friends, for all of you, thank you so very much for tuning in. And also for those of you on YouTube, thank you for watching. And we will be back next Saturday morning at 8:30. And until then, my friends, keep learning, keep growing, and keep doing the work to reach your potential. Take care, everybody.